Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today's my number 26 team in my 2026 NFL Deep Dive series, the New Orleans Saints, who are a bit of a rise here, but not enough really has been done with their roster. I feel at this point to get them much higher than this. It is a real tight race, though. I think by the end of the season, they will be much better. We'll get to why I think that is throughout this video, but make sure you guys hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the future content in this series. Leave a thumbs up so it gets pushed out to more football heads, more crazy football people in the YouTube zeitgeist. I don't want you guys to miss when I reveal your favorite team, but let's stick with the New Orleans Saints for now, who are in a complete rebuild mode, but seem to maybe have gotten the quarterback and the coach correct from what we saw last year. Shough and Kellen Moore had a lot of chemistry. They looked really good. They added to the wide receiver room with Jordan Tyson, a huge pickup, my wide receiver one coming out of this draft. Really improved the weapons room for Shough, and added Travis Etienne to the running back room. Him and Alvin Kamara, now a two-headed monster. You would anticipate throughout most of this season at least, before maybe a decision is made on Alvin Kamara's career, though he does want to remain a Saint, at least of the last time we were talking about Alvin Kamara trade rumors. The offensive line is looking really good. Got some young players that they've drafted over the last couple of years that are looking to come into fruition here. Kelvin Banks, Talisi Fuaga. On the defensive side of the ball, there's a mixture of some interesting new faces and maybe a couple of underrated guys and a few overrated guys. Some of the Saints fan favorite guys that I don't find to be that good, we'll get to those guys. And then maybe some of the guys that are a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. We'll get to all that as we go on, but as always, we're going to start here with the coaching staff. So Kellen Moore comes in as my 15th ranked head coach. He came into New Orleans last year with a team that seemingly no aspiring head coach wanted any part of. They fired Dennis Allen, who wasn't a great head coaching option, but considering the cap hell that they were in, the aging roster, the weird quarterback situation that they found themselves stuck in, it's not a surprise that Dennis Allen was the one that they kind of just assigned this to, because no one else wanted this job. And then Kellen Moore comes in late in the process, takes over, and it looked like this was going to be one of, if not the worst teams in the league last year. I think a lot of people felt that coming in. He has Doug Nussmeier as his offensive coordinator. He has Brandon Staley as his defensive coordinator. And it just looked like this is going to be a long, long process. And how good this team ended up looking at the end of the year, it is a testament to Kellen Moore being the absolute right person for the job. They had no business being as competitive as they were throughout most of the season, especially once Shough got introduced. And it was done by executing on offense in a way that was very beneficial to someone like a Shough. You know, you wanted that quarterback-friendly rhythm passing game with the RPOs. You know, you simplify the offense in that way while also adding different layers to it to allow for better execution. And they seem to have really committed to having that pass to set up the run style with the mesh and the stick and the verticals, stretching the defenses vertically and horizontally by adding Jordan Tyson, by adding Travis Etienne, by drafting Oscar Delp, the tight end out of Georgia, late in the game, by keeping Alvin Kamara, by maintaining Juwan Johnson. You're going to see these great little sets that are going to come up. You're going to see the two wide receivers with the two tight ends, and you're going to be able to interchange these tight ends across the entire offense to create these matchup issues. And then when they get into the red zone, these teams have to come up to them and they have to play that press man coverage on the outsides. You're going to hit them with the play action and the crossers, make those linebackers take a step up, because you've got a formidable running attack now with Travis Etienne and Alvin Kamara as your number one, number two backs. The linebackers are going to have to commit to them. And you're going to be able to clear out space because they're going to have to pay attention to these guys also in the passing game. When you run them out on a little swing onto the outside, those linebackers are going to have to commit, and that's going to clear out a whole lot of space in the middle of the field for guys like Olave, for guys like Jordan Tyson, for guys like Juwan Johnson and Oscar Delp, and whoever else you will have there on the field. and they're going to run those crossers. The defense is going to have to do a whole lot of communicating. There's going to be gaps that are going to form naturally, and it's just a matter of Tyler Shough finding the right guys. I like that they're going to mix in the inside and outside zone runs to match with the RPOs. So you're going to see the stretch RPO. You're going to see that inside dive. And what they're going to be doing is you'll see a lot of teams that sort of run to set up the pass. They're going to be doing a lot of the opposite of that this year, especially when you look at the players that they added, like I've said. It's going to be a pass to set up the run. They're going to stretch these defenses out. They're going to make the linebackers play on their heels and the safeties play on their heels, or make the safeties play downfield, create lighter boxes, and then run the ball with Etienne and Kamara, maybe even Devin Neal or Kendre Miller. A lot of good backs. I think they're going to be, the yards per carry, I think, are going to be super high for this team. It's going to create a lot of great opportunities for the offensive line in the run game, also make their jobs a lot easier, make their assignments a lot more simplified. And it's going to force defenses to be, I would say, more aggressive early in a game to try and dictate the pace. But when the Saints, I think, have the personnel here on offense where they're going to be able to dictate the pace in a lot of these games, that's just a matter now of them having the execution and them having the maturity in the players on the offensive side. You know, it's a very young team in some key spots. But I really like this offensive coaching staff. It is a tier 2 coaching staff for me on offense, which is flirting right there with the top of being, you know, it's so close. If Kellen Moore can repeat what he did last year, it would certainly bump him into that tier 1. You know, but putting him as this 15th ranked head coach, it's really a tight race with a lot of these coaches that overperformed last year. On the defensive side, they get tier 4 defensive coaching because Brandon Staley is just, he's such a hit and miss guy. He comes in with that Fangio style defense where, for those of you that are unfamiliar, it's not a lot of blitzing. He'll line up as a 3-4 multiple front, mostly out of like a 3 down lineman, 3 interior defensive linemen with maybe an athletic 3-4 D end out there. But they don't do a lot of blitzing. It's a lot of the 4-man, sending 4 men, and then everyone else is just worried about keeping everything else in front of you. Their idea is they disguise the coverage, they'll play the split safeties, but it's a lot of light boxes, a lot of simulated pressures, and they want to force an opposing offense to just dink and dunk down the field and then be sure tackling down the field after the catch is made, and maybe play a little bit tight coverage on the outside. I don't know what the bodies that they have right now are going to be capable of really doing that. And I think that this style of defense just doesn't currently suit the skill sets of the defensive players they have out there. I mean, they lost to Mario Davis in free agency, didn't really replace him. You know, they got Caden Ellis, which is not that great of a replacement for a guy like DeMario Davis, who would really help make this work. He's a great communicator, veteran communicator, and good in coverage, be able to step up and fill in the right running gaps. It'll be rough replacing him with what they have out there. And then, you know, you lose Alontae Taylor in free agency. You know, you got Quincy Riley, who did okay. You got Kool-Aid McKinstry's going to step into that number 1 corner role. You know, with the safety room and stuff, you got Julian Blackmon, who you're introducing into there. A very underrated player. I'm very high on him. But he's more like a safety nickel type. So it's going to be rough for them to have those guys do all the work they're going to do when the 4-man fronts they're going to be putting out there aren't going to be that strong in terms of the pass rush anyway. Not taking anything away from Carl Granderson, but he's much more of a great run defending defensive end than like a true number 1. And Chase Young, I guess, did okay last year, was sort of a hit and miss edge rusher, sort of the story of his career so far. Is he somebody that can reliably be a number 1 edge guy? I'm not all the way sure. There's a lot of nuance to and details to why I don't see him as a number 1 edge guy. And then from an interior perspective, Brian Breezy hasn't really worked out, but you got some interesting rotational guys in there for sure, and you added Kristen Miller into that group. The interior rush is, I think, going to be the real key here to help this defense really execute the way it needs to with the lack of blitzing. I do wonder if maybe Brandon Staley, just out of necessity, will introduce more blitzing from this type of defense that isn't really used to that. That does a lot of reliance on playing more of a nuanced, smart game on the back end without that hyper aggressiveness. I like that they're pretty much setting themselves up to not get beat deep and give up big plays on defense. It works well when you have an offense that's able to execute consistently. And so that's where this combination could really work out if Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier can get the offense executing consistently and regularly, because then the defense can do this whole sit back, let everything come to you, play aggressive at the point of attack, but, don't be hyper aggressive at the line of scrimmage type of defensive strategy from Staley. And Staley's also like this huge into, the analytics and all that kind of crap that really got him in trouble with the Chargers. How Kellen Moore also sort of chooses to allow that to be a driving force of the defense and how much he just sort of moves away from that, that'll be something to watch, because the Saints, from a defensive perspective last year, were more the issue than the offense was by like a wide margin. The offense wasn't like this world-beating offense, but it showed a hell of a lot more potential than what the defense did. And so this is really going to be the telltale year for someone like Brandon Staley. If the defense can't really get itself going, then Kellen Moore will have to sort of change his overall strategy from what he wants from the defense and go a completely different direction than this. Because like the thing with these defenses is that the Fangio style became super popular because Vic Fangio ran it so well, but none of the real disciples of it have been able to execute all that well. And they've always sort of ended up with these, bottom 12 defenses from everyone that's been running them. It's very rare that we'll see like a Fangio disciple come out and just light the world on fire. But then Vic Fangio goes to the Philadelphia Eagles, makes them an incredible defense, and then people sort of go back to it like, oh, we could get a Fangio disciple, and that's what Kellen Moore did here. Jumping over from Philly, grabbing Brandon Staley to be that, to carry over what they had in Philadelphia, and I don't think that it's necessarily going to have the exact same results and the results that he's hoping for. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and the thumbs up on this video. That helps me out, it helps other people see it, and it helps me out. And it makes it so you don't miss when I reveal your favorite team in a future video if they haven't already been released. But right now, let's, again, focus on the Saints, get to the offensive players, starting with the quarterback, who I actually really like. So with the quarterback, Tyler Shough, I got him as the 24th ranked quarterback right now, gets a 77 grade. There's a huge jump off point for Tyler Shough, and that is if he can build on what he did last year, there's no reason to believe that he won't find himself as a true top 15 quarterback in the NFL. You worry about the ceiling for him, but I think from a floor perspective, he showed that he could really be something, because let's just take a look at some of the analytics on him. He was 26th in big time throws, but he was only 4th in turnover worthy plays. So they weren't pushing that ball down the field all that much. He was, 18th in deep ball when they did push it down the field, but they really worked themselves in the intermediate areas a lot last year. And he wasn't putting the ball in harm's way, which is a good little jump off point, is when you got that quarterback who's not going to put the ball in harm's way, and then you can slowly, as he gains more confidence, introduce more pushing the ball down the field. They didn't execute well in the short. He didn't have a lot of time to throw. It was a lot of quick decision making there, RPOs and whatnot. Where they really need to improve is in the play action game. And I think that's why you add someone like Travis Etienne, is sort of give your running attack a little bit more credibility. with an aging Alvin Kamara who's never had a 1,000-yard rushing season in his career, which is a stat that sounds like a lie because he was so good for so long, but he was such an overall back. Like, just get him touches in all different ways, use the passing game to extend. It hurts the play action game when you do that. And when you have a young quarterback, you want Tyler Shough to be as in many situations where you get that one-on-one coverage, where, especially when you have Jordan Tyson and you have Chris Olave out there. Those are great receivers. You got like 2 number 1 types on your team. You want to get them out of that double coverage situation. You want to bring a safety down to the line of scrimmage. You want that linebacker to take a step up first before realizing, oh crap, it's a pass. I got to get back into my zone here. So you want to improve that play action game and that play action execution. Facing pressure, he was 26th, which is what you would expect from a young quarterback. But when he was kept clean, 16th. When they weren't blitzing, 18th. When they did blitz, 10th. Now that's great anticipation by Kellen Moore with his play calling, sort of understanding when the blitzes are coming, but also great, pre-snap analysis by the quarterback. Great understanding of situational football and understanding the blitz is coming. Got to figure out where my hot reads are. So him being able to do that is going to create significant growth for him as the seasons go on. Now he's going to get the full regular season, the full training camp as a starter. No Spencer Rattler eating into team 1 reps. And we're going to see if he can make that leap now. The pressure faults, he was 25th, and that you run into these issues when you have these mobile quarterbacks. And Tyler Shough, he was a meme a bit for his horrendous decision making sometimes at Louisville that he seemingly completely cleaned up. Like we said, 4th in turnover worthy plays, but you don't want the turnover worthy plays when he creates them to be like these super boneheaded ones. You got to accept that this play is dead. Not every play is going to work. Sometimes you got to drop back 1, 2, 3, everyone's covered, the pocket's collapsing, just eat it and move on. Don't try to back up, run away. Like him and Jackson Dart are the 2 that really, that's going to be something that has to be drilled into their heads here, is that you can't win them all. So don't try. Live to fight another day. There'll be plenty of other opportunities throughout a game. You don't want to do something that's going to set you back worse than just losing 5 yards here on second down, or on first down, even worse. So that development, but I think he's got it. Him being a little bit more mature coming into the league, him being, a little bit more steady, him having the dual threat ability also is really important. But having the arm talent to put the ball into some windows, to trust to put the ball down the field. And that's why you add the guys that you added, is to give him more opportunities to do that. I think there's a huge upside here that he showed. And, I'm not going to spend too much time on Spencer Rattler. He sort of just is what he is at this point. He's a good backup who, if he has to come in and play a couple of games, need be, fine. Zach Wilson's just the big arm that you have as your 3rd string emergency quarterback. But Tyler Shough really came in, took over, took the reins completely away from Spencer Rattler, did what he needed to, and to be that 2nd round pick, to go ahead of somebody with the hype train of Shedeur Sanders and to turn around public opinion the way he did, that was a lot of pressure, considering what the public opinion was of him and compared to quarterback that was passed up on. So it showed a lot of mental toughness, I think, in Tyler Shough. Shough. I know someone's going to get upset with me for his pronunciation here, but whatever. And, having some poise and trusting the offensive line, getting maybe your center for a full season, which we'll get to, having a smart, elite level all-pro center like Eric McCoy healthy for all season long will do him wonders as well. it's a really great pairing between Kellen Moore and Tyler Shough, which at the beginning looked like it was just a Band-Aid until they get their quote-unquote real quarterback next year. Kellen Moore hit a home run here, committing to Tyler Shough, getting him on the field halfway through that season, and having an offense that was tailor-made for the skill set. And landing on the weapons here, 14th to 21st, they're in like that middle tier where what they're looking for is the execution of the guys on the field. A lot of potential, a lot of size also, some significant catch radiuses. And it starts with Chris Olave, who 151 targets, 100 catches, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. This is what a healthy Chris Olave can do. When you worry about the concussions, you worry about, the significance of these injuries that he's been experiencing. But I feel like now you kind of take the pressure off of him, because what he's able to do on the field, he's able to play outside. He's able to come into the slot. In the slot, he was ranked 14th in the whole league amongst receivers. 22nd against man, 20th against the zone. That's fine. Him playing consistently against both things, being able to put him in any situation. You like to see him improve on the contested catches a little bit, be a little bit more firm at the catch point. He's not a big yak guy, only 292 yards out of the 1163, but he scored 9 touchdowns. When he was called upon to get the yak, he was actually really good. He was 16th amongst all eligible wide receivers when catching the ball behind the line of scrimmage. So he earned those 292 yards when he got it. And then a lot of the other stuff was just, downfield threat, catch the ball, try to get a little bit more, but mostly just executing those deep outs, those crossers, those verticals, making good catches, being a reliable source. And when the quarterback puts the ball on you, making sure you come down with it. He was 31st in drops percentage, which I understand that's a huge logjam. Doesn't necessarily mean he had a drop issue, I would say. And again, the versatility, the inside out. Offensive coordinators, offensive play callers love that, because it allows you to create mismatches. It allows you to create manufactured touches for guys that you want to get the ball in their hands. And he's definitely a guy that you want to get the ball in his hands. You want to see him perform better deep and in the short. But it was a team, again, they worked a lot of the intermediate areas for most of the year, especially when Tyler Shough got introduced into the starting lineup. Now I want to see the ball get pushed down the field more. So we'll see how he executes when given those situations. I'm not so worried about him in the short areas. As it is, they have plenty of other options where working and executing in the short areas, 0 to 9 yards, is much more important. But then you move over to their first round pick, wide receiver Jordan Tyson, who was my wide receiver 1, and what he did in college football was extraordinary. He had a quarter of his snaps in the slot as well. I think you can see that being interchangeable also. He was the 7th highest rated slot receiver, a receiver in the slot, quote unquote slot receiver, in the 25% of the time he was out there. So you theoretically can put him in the slot here at the professional level and expect good things from him. So having that, your 2 main outside wide receivers, being able to bump them inside, that's a nightmare for defenses. He was great against man, 4th of all eligible wide receivers. In zone, he was 28th. That you want to see improve, because you want to see him being able to find gaps, sit down, and not just run across the field. Especially when you're running those crossers, you want him to run across it, but you want him to identify with the zone so he knows where to sit once he gets across the middle of the field. His contested catch wasn't that good. That's something that needs to drastically improve. He didn't drop the ball a whole lot, though. He wasn't credited with a high number of drops. And the irony is he was sort of the inverse of what you got from Chris Olave last year, where he wasn't great in the intermediate areas. Where he was executing was in the short and deep down the field. So adding him to this offense is very specific to increasing the amount of times you're pushing the ball down the field. And he is a great route runner. And him and Chris Olave, they sort of can play the same role together. So putting them on the field together, to me, is which one do you choose? Because at any point in time, the one guy can be the deep down the field guy, the other one's the route runner. The other one's running the option route. The other one's running the comeback. You put yourself in a situation now where you can be much more assertive and creative on the offensive side. You add Bryce Lance and Berrien Brown, who are going to be, some backups here, some developmental guys. You had Mason Tipton already there. You got Juwan Johnson and Noah Fant and Oscar Delp as your tight ends. You can run a lot of 2 tight end sets there. You can split these guys into the slot, split them out wide. You're going to have a lot of versatility there with your tight ends. And then even Alvin Kamara and Travis Etienne, I have Kamara just a little bit better. I think this is where Kamara is going to get a lot more of his opportunities is in the passing game. But when you have that versatility there as well, the defense can't even anticipate what you're going to do now based upon the receivers out there. And then Devon Vele. I've been a Devon Vele guy since his rookie season in Denver. Just this massive slot who's able to, again, mixing and matching him in with Olave, with Jordan Tyson. You've now got another big-bodied guy that can run routes as a slot receiver, create matchup issues. If you need him to, he kicks outside. And now, how do you match this up? You can't really prepare your nickel to be solely on Devon Vele, because then your nickel's going to have to start playing outside a whole bunch when they kick Jordan Tyson into the slot, or they kick Chris Olave into the slot, or where they kick both into the slot. And then you got Juwan Johnson and Devon Vele as your outside wide receivers for a couple of plays there, or for a package of plays. Or you got 4 wide receivers out there with Bryce Lance from North Dakota State going out there. He plays on the outside with Vele on the outside as well. How do you match up as an opposing defense? They got a high upside here. A really high upside. If Jordan Tyson can stay healthy, the upside for this group, I got, again, 14th to 21st, but they could be a legitimate top 10 weapons group by the end of this season. And then you move into the running back room, and I got them 19th to 21st. They're not like this super high-end running, but it's being able to use both of them without really having to worry. You put, I think Travis Etienne's the better overall, quote-unquote, pure running back, turn around, hand the ball off guy, especially at this stage in his career. But you have Alvin Kamara, who's like, they're interchangeable. A team's not going to just be like, oh, Kamara's in, they're not going to run. You got Travis Etienne, who last year, 128 zone carries, 116 gap carries for Jacksonville, over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, only put the ball on the ground once, almost 800 yards after contact. He had 9 explosive runs, counted for 48 first downs. He was great. It's probably his best overall season that he's had, and which is why he's able to leave and then return to Louisiana, and now he's pretty much going to be grandfathered in as the next great starting back, you would assume, here in New Orleans, as Alvin Kamara works his way out. And Travis Etienne, you can run him inside and outside. He can run routes. He can somebody that you can put in motion and split out, and he can actually run a little nice option route out there, and he's got some sure hands. Surer hands than most running backs, that's for sure. A great all-around back who's had the ups and downs in his career, but what we saw last year is what happens when you get true great competency in the offensive coaching, and Travis Etienne can fit in perfectly. You run that back with Alvin Kamara, who didn't have a lot of carries last year in comparison, 79 zone, 48 gap, 471 yards rushing, 3.6 yards a carry. Only found the end zone once. It was a sobering year. I would say, for Alvin Kamara, and I think that's what opened up them going out and getting Travis Etienne or Etienne, because it got to the point where it's like, okay, Kamara works really well in a two-headed monster, right? Like, is there a better running back duo of this generation than Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara when Kamara first came to the league out of Tennessee? Very hard to find. His ability to play in the passing game, be an extra receiver, an extra true wide receiver on the field, and then he still has the breakaway ability, he still has the vision, he still has that like gliding stride where it looks like he's jogging out there, but he's just outrunning people. All that's still there. It's just you're sort of winding down the amount of touches he's going to get to try and maximize the ability that he has. Again, that's why you add the running back. You add the guy who can be more of a bell cow back. You can add the guy who can give 70% of the carries to. And then Alvin Kamara can come in and be like the true versatile running back where you get those third and shorts. Alvin Kamara comes in, okay, now a defense goes, they could do anything. They could run a screen. They could run a draw. They could just straight up drop back and pass it. They could run play action with a little slip out into the flats. They can run a play action where he can run a Texas or something. And he's such a great route runner. He's got such great hands. Now the defense, you're thinking. You're doing a lot of thinking. You're not doing a whole lot of executing. And I think that's a really great component for this offense. It really rounds it out really well. And as an overall running back weaponry unit, you've created a great opportunity for Tyler Shough, who does have great running ability. He comes in with a tier 4 running back boost or running game boost, because you don't want him to be using that running back ability, that designed run all that often. You much more want to be in an RPO type game with him, where if the play breaks down, you know he can escape, you know he can extend plays. But I think you're going to have less and less this year of the design quarterback runs. And you're simultaneously rolling out one of the better offensive lines in the league if the key component can stay healthy, which they haven't. It's the 4th to 7th best pass blocking O-line, the 15th to 17th best run blocking O-line. Which, from an overall sense, hard to find better than that, even from a depth perspective. But we start with Kelvin Banks, the tackle, the left tackle, second-year tackle, who had a very up and down rookie season, but did what you want to see rookie tackles do. You know, there was a lot of questions about him being a tackle even when he came into the league. There was a lot of talk about him maybe being a guard from a length perspective and just a body composition perspective. And he certainly had some stinker games out there, but simultaneously had a lot of really good performances. I really liked what Kelvin Banks was able to introduce in a lot of situations. He showed some poise in a lot of situations, showed really good execution against speed and against power. When guys tried to convert speed to power, I thought he did pretty well in a lot of instances. He just was inconsistent, which it's hard to say. Like, other than Tristan Wirfs, it's really hard to point out a left tackle that came into the league that wasn't inconsistent in at least his rookie year. While you're getting used to the speed, you're getting used to different calls, you're getting used to different stunts and more exotic blitzes, and understanding, you know, where the quarterback in the offense needs you to slide and who you need to let go and who you need to make sure you get. Learning situational football a little bit better than what you had in college. All these factors run into it, and he was no less inconsistent or no more inconsistent than Andrew Thomas was in his rookie year with the Giants. And what we saw in that second year from Andrew Thomas was an all-pro caliber season. So letting this rookie grow, I think there's a lot of high hopes for Kelvin Banks and what he can do here in his sophomore season. You want to see him improve in the run game. You want to see him improve, obviously, in pass protection, not giving up so many pressures and sacks and quarterback hurries. Because, 85th, 90th, 77th, that's high, but he was on the field for 680 pass snaps, which is an absurd number to begin with, but still very high to just throw a rookie tackle into the fire when he's going up against defensive coordinators like Ajira Evero and Todd Bowles 4 times a year. Like, that alone is huge, and those guys are going to pick on him, and he got picked on a lot, and he won some and he lost some, but he did seemingly have like that short memory that you like to see when things go bad. It didn't seem to compound itself on top of each other, and he was able to bounce back in games from rough starts, rough drives, and then come back and have a great drive or have a great quarter or a great half. And that's what you want to see from these guys as they develop. Playing next to him, you got David Edwards, the veteran. Nice, rounded, all-around veteran guard. You got Cesar Ruiz, sort of the same, a little bit lesser in the run game. But the key to this all is Eric McCoy. What does Eric McCoy do in terms of his health? Because last season, 276 pass snaps, 173 run snaps. That's it. With that said, in those 276 pass snaps, he didn't let a soul by him. 5th in quarterback hits, 1st in hurries, 1st in pressures, no sacks. In 276 snaps. So to give up very minimal in a small sample size is certainly a good sign. However, you got to keep kind of lowering his grades from last year and the year before that, because the best ability is availability. And when you're not on the field, what good is it if you're a 90 pass blocker? What good are you as an 84 run blocker? It's just not that high. Right? So I had to lower his grades here from what maybe he actually is, just because of what that overall impact is actually going to be this year as the starting center. Is he going to actually be on the field for 1,000 snaps this year? Or is he going to be another 500 snap season and you're kind of like, are we forced to move on from this to get a more consistent starting center here? Because a quarterback's best friend is a good run game, a good defense, and a solid, reliable center. It's the most underrated aspect of what helps a young quarterback develop is that veteran center. And when Eric McCoy's on the field, it's very difficult to find better than him. But he's never on the field. So with that said, the Cesar Ruiz kicks into center. You get Dylan Radunes to come on the field and be your right guard. Significantly lowers in the pass blocking, significantly lowers you in run blocking. It's a good backup to have, though. Asim Richards as a swing tackle, decent. Nick Saldiveri as like a 5th interior offensive lineman is fine. But you also drafted Jeremiah Wright, who I think is more than expected to take over that spot. And inevitably, I think, is the guy they're setting up to replace Cesar Ruiz, who I don't know is necessarily going to be on this team for all that much longer. You got Talisi Fuaga going into his 3rd year. You want to see him develop a little bit more. The idea is they wanted Kelvin Banks and Talisi Fuaga to be their tackle duo. To be that Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill pairing that you can ride for 5, 6, 7 years. You may hopefully be able to pay them both and have those 2 bookend tackles. And then you fill the interior with just solid veterans, kind of like they did with David Edwards and to a degree Cesar Ruiz. Guys you don't need to pay all that much. Guys that can be rotated in and out. But to have those 3 pillars, I think long term is really important for what Tyler Shough can become, what this offense can be execution-wise. So with that said, overall, it is my 21st ranked offense coming in to start the season. 23rd pass offense, 17th rush attack. Approaching, needs a little bit more time, needs a little bit more development. We'll see how quickly Tyler Shough can outperform that grade in that ranking. And it really, how this offense does perform is based on that, because then that instantly improves the pass offense and gives this overall offense a significant boost, helps the offensive coaching, that tier 2 coaching staff, expand their play calling, get more creative, get more aggressive, and execute more plays down the field. Now let's move on to the defensive side of the ball here, and it's a mishmash. It's a mishmash of players here. We'll start with the front four, the defensive line. And this defensive front, it's just uninspiring. I'm 29th to 30th in pass rush, 6th to 28th in run defense. It's a lot of, if this was the third best guy on your team, boy, you'd feel good about it. You'd feel so great about it. You got Carl Granderson, who's very much your 3-down all-purpose defensive end, who comes in here and, he's just a solid player, a great, edge 2. 7 sacks, good for 40th, 50th in pressures, 42nd in hurries, 24th in batted balls, got 746 snaps in, pretty much all from the outside. He's not going to be somebody you're going to move around all that much. He's very much a defensive end and probably in a 3-4 multiple, like a good 3-4 outside linebacker. Adjusting to being maybe more of an outside linebacker type without his hand in the ground. But I don't hate the Carl Granderson signing. He's one of those guys who is that high floor, low ceiling player, the one that you're really confident putting out there, the one is not going to go out there and make a gigantic mistake. He may just not be a guy who changes the game for you, who goes out and makes a game-breaking play, a game-changing sack, or a game-changing third down stop. Sheds that block and then gets the guy in the backfield. That's not what he does. He doesn't have that upside that you would expect from other defensive end number ones or edge ones that you'd have on your team, which is really what lowers the overall potential of this defensive line, is the fact that he kind of is your best player on the defensive line. You've got a lot of highly invested players out there that aren't former 7th round picks or whatever Granderson was, might have even been undrafted, that aren't as good as him and that have had a couple years of development and aren't as good as him. Like, he's got great power. He's got good speed. He's got good hand placement. He can play against top tackles in the league. He can play on both sides, left and right. He doesn't really lose anything going from one side to the other in terms of what his execution is. He's got a good first step, not a great first step. Good hands, not great hands. Good power, not great power. Good speed, not great speed. It's really just the story of him. Good, but not great. And you need great out of this group. And you ain't getting it from Chase Young, who at this stage in his career, I don't see him as any more of a great edge rusher than Carl Granderson. And he's just not somebody that I would prefer to have on the field in those short yardage run situations and those surefire run stopping situations. I like that they went and got Tyree Wilson and they got Anthony Jennings. I think Tyree Wilson will find himself a lot more often as a 3-4 defensive end. Really more of a backup to what they have in Brian Breezy. Anthony Jennings, coming over from that Patriots defense, at one point, he had some really great run defending years. So maybe he sort of steps up as your 3-4 outside linebacker run stopper. But I know you see that Brian Breezy grade, and there's a lot of Brian Breezy truthers out there who are furious with me right now. Absolutely furious. Well, let me make my arguments here. 72 rush, 68 against the run. 37th in pressures, 68th in pass rush win percentage, 31st in hits, 35th in hurries amongst all defensive tackles, 44th in sacks amongst all defensive tackles. Don't tell me he didn't get the reps. 667 defensive line snaps last year, 368 from the B gap, 191 from that more 3-4 defensive end type role, 4-eye. He even took 92 edge snaps, which I don't get that at all. I'd much rather those snaps go to him being in the B gap, get him out from being an outside player, get him out of the 5 tech. But he was 132nd in missed tackle percentage. 132nd. There's 64 starting defensive tackles. He was at the bottom end of the 4th best defensive tackle on a team. The bottom end for missed tackles. That is completely unacceptable. I get he's a little bit more of an undersized guy compared to most interior defensive linemen. But to just be such an unsure tackler, and that leads to him being 93rd in stops percentage. You're not even a nose tackle, so you're not eating a lot of double teams all that often. Most of what you're doing is singled up against one of the guards, and you're just not winning at the point of attack. Just not winning at the point of attack, and that is, it's just the sign that he's not living up to that first round drafting grade, that first round talent. And I think there's a huge conversation that has to happen, because I know people go like, oh, like he had sacks in the last couple of years and he was doing this and he was doing. It's just not been anything consistent. It's just not there. That's why you go and you draft Kristen Miller out of Georgia, a much better player, a much more reliable player, and a much better developmental piece to put out there, who comes in as maybe between him and Nathan Shepard, you're competing for who's your best overall interior defensive lineman. And I think as the year goes on, you put those two out there in those pass rush situations in particular, you're going to have a much better interior pass rush than what you had when Brian Breezy was playing that role. Now, can Brian Breezy develop? Is he going to be a late bloomer? Sure. Is it much more likely that he's just more of a defensive tackle 3 in the NFL, better as a rotational piece? And then you have Tyree Wilson, who you just brought in as much more of a true developmental piece who can have a higher ceiling. I think that is something that this team is more leaning in towards. Because to get Kristen Miller and Tyree Wilson, they're eating into Brian Breezy's snap count. They're not really eating into Nathan Shepard's snap count, because he's mostly out there to rush the passer. So, you got John Ridgway, who's like a pass rushing nose. Devon Godchow, who's also a nose type. So they're not really in direct competition with Brian Breezy for snaps. I just don't. I think the overall summary here of this defensive line is no upside, or a low upside, and a tragically low floor, because Chase Young as a pass rusher has been horrific a lot. Carl Granderson is who he is at this point, not a high ceiling guy. Brian Breezy has been terrible a lot. Christian Miller is a rookie, doing a lot of assuming of what he can be at the next level. Nathan Shepard kind of is what he is. Good pass rusher, not a great run defender. Tyree Wilson, huge developmental piece. Anthony Jennings kind of is what he is, an edge 4. Devon Godchow, kind of a nose tackle that you can put in there in certain situations to be a space eater in jumbo situations. John Ridgway, if you're looking for a little bit more athleticism from a nose tackle, but nobody here's a game breaker. There's really no sign that anyone in this group is just, he's on the edge. There's no like what you have with your quarterback, where it's like he's on the edge. He just needs a little bit more. Get him a little bit more help. Get him a little bit more experience, and he's going to be somebody. There's no sign of that here. And it really drags down the defense horrifically. Now with the linebackers, you lose Demario Davis, which drags you down significantly in where you rank against the rest of the league. Losing one of the best Mike linebackers is a huge hit. And then you go out and get a guy like Caden Ellis, who's not really this traditional Mike linebacker. He's a good cover guy, keeps you 10th to 12th in coverage, but you're 29th in run defense. And that's really where your linebackers are the most important, right? Like, he had 30 pressures, which is good. You know, it's a blitz. He's at least got a blitz potential. But he's going into a defense that doesn't blitz. At the very least, isn't designed to blitz, right? He had good man coverage skills, 6th, 27th in zone, so he's a decent cover guy. 7th in pass breakups, did give up 4 touchdowns. But he was targeted quite a bit last year, 60 times. He was 30th in completion percentage allowed, which is decent. You know, it's fine as long as you're keeping it in front of you, and 46 catches, only 370 yards allowed. That's a lot of catch tackle right away, which is kind of what you can hope for here from a linebacker. He was 43rd in missed tackles percentage, which is not something you want to see. 80th in stops, not great. And now you're asking him and Pete Werner to basically try and fill the shoes of Demario Davis as like that true inside linebacker. And is Caden Ellis going to be that? Or is he going to be somebody who's going to end up being more of like your outside linebacker that you're, you know, as your pass rush doesn't really execute, does he sort of bounce over to being that? I think there's just too many questions, and I don't see how he and his skill set and what he brings and what he's brought in his career suits what this defense is trying to be, or at least what the scheme of the defense tries to be. Now, is he the sign that Brandon Staley's going to go a lot more into blitzing? It could be, which I would actually really like. I'd like to see more blitz added in to this type of defense. And he's the perfect guy to be able to bring that. But what does he bring in run defense when you have to play him and Pete Werner on the field? What does he bring in that? Because Pete Werner is a slightly lesser version of Caden Ellis. More traditional linebacker type for sure. But are you going to have Danny Stutzman get more playing time? Try to develop him as more traditional linebacker over Caden Ellis? Isaiah Stallbird, Jalen Ford, like, you got a lot of special teams depth here, but you're really banking on Caden Ellis and Pete Werner really just trying to meld into one and become what Demario Davis and Werner were the year before. Again, it's just a weird team building decision that was made on the defensive side of the ball that sort of flies in the face of what they were doing on the offensive side of the ball. Right? Like, you had draft picks and a strong, very strong linebacker class coming out this year, and you didn't swing at any of them. You didn't go for Jacob Rodriguez. You went Christian Miller instead, which I can see the balance in that. But then you get into the third round, the fourth round, fifth round. There's still really good linebackers on the board, and you went for none of them. It's a concerning decision that again is going to drag down the overall ability of what this defense is, and it's just setting up Brandon Staley in a way where it's like, now you're into the area where these guys need to be good cover guys and good run defenders, because you're not necessarily setting up a blitzing situation here. You're playing two high safeties, so you need your linebackers to play much larger and create the illusion of a packed box when you're playing those two high safeties. And these are the guys you're putting out there where it's like, is Caden Ellis going to be an A-gap player? I think it's just too much. I think it was just a poor decision to play into like this nostalgia where we brought back Caden Ellis. don't worry, everyone. I know Demario Davis is gone. He was an old man, even though he's still one of the best linebackers in the league. And you're just hoping Pete Werner develops finally. And maybe Pete Werner takes over as linebacker 1 here, because Caden Ellis is going to be moving around also all that much and maybe playing more of a 3-4 outside linebacker role in more situations than maybe we're currently giving credit for. It's a make or break position group, specifically for the run defense, and I think that they made a back-breaking mistake here, because now up the middle of this team, with what you have in the defensive tackles and what you have in the linebackers, this run defense could be a significant liability to your team. And then you get to the secondary here, and they're 25th and 29th in coverage. They're a tier 3 run defending group. They got some depth. I don't hate the depth of this group at all. But Kool-Aid McKinstry is very much being set up here to be your number 1 corner. I liked him coming out of Alabama. He took 886 corner snaps last year and was hit and miss. He was 66th in man, 36th in zone. He was targeted 84 times, gave up the 44th completion percentage, so just outside number 1 production. 24th in forced incompletions, which is good. Gave up 676 yards, which is but gave up 8 touchdowns. That was 121st. That was amongst the most given up by a corner. But he had 3 interceptions and 12 PBUs, which was top 10 in both categories. 84th in passer rating. So it was a lot of, again, hit and miss from Kool-Aid McKinstry. And when you get these Alabama corners who played a lot of man coverage, played a lot of press man coverage, played very aggressively, you do end up with this hit and miss type of production. Now, when you don't have a great pass rush, when you're almost designed to not have a great pass rush, the way Brandon Staley does, not a lot of blitzing, a lot of having to be sticky out there, it does lend to these more aggressive corners finding themselves in more trouble than necessarily they need to. You want a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry to be able to play with a little bit more reckless abandon. Let him play tight, let him play, and then let him be aggressive for the ball. And I don't like the way that this defensive strategy really matches up with him, because he can be so much more than this. I think he can be much more in man coverage, but he ends up running around a lot more because you're only sending a 4-man rush. And if teams are running more intermediate areas to avoid the 2 high safeties, you're really putting yourself in a situation where a corner like Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to potentially get burned badly. But you're also setting up where if you get a good pass rush, Kool-Aid McKinstry is the perfect guy to have out on the field. So it really is like it's a boom or bust situation. You know, Quincy Riley had a good little year last year. Isaac Yadam is sort of settled in as like a low-end starter caliber. I love Julian Blackmon to be just a straight-up nickel for this team. I think he can be so good here. You know, Beanie Bishop and Martin Emerson out there in your depth. Beanie Bishop's had like sneaky good performances back in Pittsburgh. TJ Hall, I think, is a real wild card here because he is a great run defender also. So I think he could really earn his way eventually into the starting lineup if they're really looking for somebody, you know, younger to sort of boost the overall production here. I don't think it's a significant boost in coverage, but I think his physicality in the run game can really be a help. Then you get Justin Reed, who's your number 1 safety, who's, again, a fine starter. Not a great starter anymore, a fine starter. He was really great in the slot. So you got really great slot production on this team, at the very least. You know, he's got the versatility to play in the box, play some safety, play some slot. When he gets targeted, he's a little vulnerable. You know, he doesn't really create a lot of turnovers. Didn't get beat that badly, to be honest. 25 catches given up on 33 targets, 176 yards only, so he's keeping things in front of him. really well. So when he is getting targeted in coverage, it's in these short areas where that's kind of a good sign when you have a safety who is not giving up a whole lot of yards despite giving up, less than 10 yards a catch. That's a really good sign for a safety, that he's actually playing pretty sticky in coverage and that he's being used really smartly and really well, especially for a team that wants to play that too high safety. Let him play up to the line of scrimmage, and that's when he's getting targeted, and it shows that their too high safety work is actually working the way they want it to, where the safety's not getting targeted, everything's staying in front of him, and nothing is really being pushed downfield on them. I think as just a solid run defender as well, he can play some physicality there. It's Jonas Sanker versus Jordan Howden really for the starting reps. And I like Jordan Howden better than Jonas Sanker. They feel the opposite. I think Jordan Howden is significantly better in run defense. I think he's significantly better in coverage. We'll see how Sanker settles in this upcoming season, currently listed as a starter. Theoretically, it shouldn't last. I think Jordan Howden should be the guy that ends up getting the starting reps. I think Lorenzo Styles Jr., the rookie from Ohio State, Sonny Styles' brother, should have somewhat of a, maybe him, maybe he's the guy thing attached to him, because I think just from a football IQ perspective, coming from Ohio State and a football family, that can't be understated either. And again, I'm putting a lot of faith in Julian Blackmon being a great nickel here, but this does have the potential to be one of the worst defensive back rooms in the league. If they're constantly leaving these guys, hanging out to dry with just very passive, conservative play calling on the defensive side, it could be a disaster, because I don't like these guys to be like these stick with the man and run around with him and stay sticky the whole time. And I just don't like that skill set for this group. And that's why they are my last ranked defense in the league, 32nd. Tier 4 coaching, 30th pass defense, dead last in run defense. It's a group that I'm just scared is ruining it for what Kellen Moore is building on the offensive side. And I think there's going to be a lot to discuss for this team in terms of their defensive coaching and in terms of their defensive roster building moving forward. They could use a lot in the secondary, and they really need to get that true blue chip defensive end that they just keep seemingly passing on from year to year. Now, taking a look at their schedule, they have the second easiest strength of schedule coming in with a 4-3-4 strength of schedule. The Vegas over-under is 7.5 wins, and I got that as a push. It's going to be close because they are so poor on defense. They're going to get into these games where shootouts aren't going to work really to their advantage. And, when you get a team like Detroit, Baltimore, the Giants all on the road, those are going to be offenses that are going to be designed to put points on the board to play fast, and you don't match up well against that, especially on the road. Chicago, Cincinnati, Green Bay, Tampa, Atlanta, those are tough outs. Those are really tough outs. You get Vegas, you get Minnesota, you get Cleveland. I really like the way they match up against them. I like getting Carolina at home. The Carolina at home game, when you play Carolina on the road, I like it a little less. I like getting Arizona late in the year at home as well. The Tampa and Carolina ones, I can see them really going either way. I think they match up a little bit better against Carolina than Tampa. I think Carolina's riding a high that maybe is about to blow up in their face a little bit. Same thing with Atlanta. I think Atlanta and Tampa, I see them as sort of like in the same stratosphere in terms of how they match up. Because Atlanta has the ability, same with Tampa Bay, to have a really high-powered offense. You just wonder about how they're going to execute that, especially Tampa that late in the season. They don't have a lot of depth there. And what's Baker Mayfield going to look like? Baker Mayfield did not look good, so maybe New Orleans can take advantage of them then. It's still going to require that, though. Same thing with Atlanta. I think getting Atlanta early in the year is better than getting them late in the year at home. So being able to take advantage of maybe as they figure out that quarterback situation with Tua and Penix. Getting Pittsburgh at home, you don't really know what Pittsburgh's going to look like on either side of the ball with McCarthy and all them. You don't really know. So that's a good little mystery for them to have, and I think they're a lot more sure coming in as to who they are as a football team than maybe Pittsburgh is, and Pittsburgh might still be in the process of finding themselves at that point. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I got them. I think there's 5 wins they can get out of this, and then they have like the potential to grab 3 more maybe. So that's about 8. So 7 to 8 wins I think is just about right for this New Orleans team. So I wouldn't bet it. It's a complete push for me. So they are overall my 26th ranked team with the 15th head coach, 21st offense, and the dead last defense, which ultimately I think is this team's downfall. And there it is, my number 26 team in my 2026 NFL Deep Dive Series, the New Orleans Saints. Leave in the comment section below what you guys think of what I think of the Saints and what you think of the Saints, and where we agree, where we disagree perhaps, commentary throughout, all the things that I said and all the position groups throughout. Please encouraged, thumbs up, subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos. Helps me out a big ton, and I will see you guys with the next video next time.